Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Micha and welcome to my Chess Realm YouTube channel. So we are still at the Charity Cup. Let's go to the fifth round, another interesting battle between Rameshbabu, Pragg, better known as Pragg, and Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Let's see what happened. In the game, Pragg had white pieces and he started with d4, knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, bishop to b4, and now knight to f3, and we have three nice variation of Ninja Indian defense. So black captures knight on c3, b pawn recaptures, now d6, queen to c2, black castles kingside. Now these are all pretty much standard moves, and now white takes over the center with e4, but not for long. Black immediately counteracts with e5. You might think that pawn on e5 is for free, but if white captures with d pawn recaptures. After knight recaptures, we have rook to e8. There is no good way of defending this knight on e5, so after knight goes back to f3, knight simply captures, threatening with discovery check, and black has a very bad pawn structure, so this is already very bad for white already at the beginning. So in the game, white plays bishop to d3, now black plays knight to c6, and white plays rook to b1, targeting this pawn on b7, who is protected by the bishop, so this is a sort of a prophylactic move, preventing this bishop to g4. Well, black indeed could have tried with bishop to g4. White cannot simply capture on b7 because then bishop captures on f3. After g pawn recaptures, we have e pawn captures on d4. After c pawn recaptures, knight to d4, attacking both queen and pawn. The only way to defend is queen to d1, and now all black needs to do is to play queen to c8, threatening to grab this rook, and later with queen to h3, preventing castling, white castling on the king side. So this is very bad for white. In the game, however, black doesn't go for it. Instead, h6 was played, preventing any unpleasant bishop or knight to g5 jump, and white did the same. h3 was played, preventing any sort of jumps on g4. And now black plays b6, preparing this rook to bishop to a6, targeting this pawn on c4. Now this motive is quite popular because white has double pawn, so it's very hard to defend this c4 pawn. White castles kingside. Now trick from before, when black plays rook to e8 doesn't work anymore, and black needs this knight to attack his pawn on c4. So first knight goes to e7, further reinforcing this knight on e5, and now white plays bishop to e3. Black plays bishop to a6, targeting of course this pawn on c4, and white immediately reacts with knight to d2, further defending, and now knight to a5. Now this pawn is 2 times attacked, 2 times defended, but now white plays queen to a4 with a very simple plan, threatening with knight to b3 jump. Let's see if black makes a random move, for example rook to e8, then we have knight to b3, double attack on knight on a5, and if knight captures, then queen maybe captures this bishop on a6. Of course knight can go back, but white has a bishop pair. After white opens the game, this is probably better for white. So in the game, black plays queen to e8. Now trick from before doesn't work anymore, because after knight to b3, black can force the trade of queens with knight to f6, attacking queen on a4. Of course, queen has to protect this pawn on c4, who is now twice attacked. If queen goes to a3, let's say, then this pawn on c4 is for free. So here white would have no other option but to trade the queens. So in the game, white plays f4. Now we have double attack on this pawn on e5. Well, black indeed could have tried with e pawn captures on d4. Even if c pawn recaptures, white get rid of the double pawns along the c file. Now these pawns here look really intimidating, but black could have struck the center with d5. Now pawn on c4 cannot capture, because then bishop on d3 is for free, and also pawn on e4 cannot capture, because then bishop on e3 is for free. So maybe after, I don't know, e5, then black simply grab this pawn on c4, and even if maybe white tries to grab it again after knight captures, knight recaptures, then another stunning move, knight to e5. First of all, attacking defenseless queen on e8. Also this knight here is double attack. If let's say queen captures bishop, then knight captures knight, and this bishop is also under attack. If, however, first white trade the queen, then simply rook recaptures. Even if, I don't know, knight captures, then we have f6. When this knight is gone, black grab this bishop again. It would be a very interesting continuation. Okay, so let's go back to our game. In the game, black plays knight to f6, offering the trade of queens. White doesn't go for it. Queen to c2 was played, threatening to capture this pawn on a5. Let's say black makes a red move, and pawn simply captures. As the pawn recaptures, we have rook captures here on f6. After g pawn recaptures, we have bishop to h6, gaining back the exchange, also opening the position around the black king. So black plays knight goes back to d7. And now white plays rook from a goes to e1, centralizing the rook, x-raying this queen on e8. Black responds with rook to d8. And now here in this position, maybe white could try with f5, later threatening with f6. Let's see, if white plays f5, all black needs to do is to make one wrong move. Let's say bishop to b7, then we have f6 targeting this pawn on g7. If knight captures pawn, then simply white sacrifices the exchange. After g pawn recaptures, we have a queen to d1, threatening to invade here on the king side. Now king is trapped here behind his pawn. Even f5 doesn't help. After e pawn recaptures, after f6 trying to escape on f7, white simply plays bishop to h6, and now here black has to give up his exchange, because for example if black plays rook to f7, we have queen to g4 check. After king goes to h8, queen to h4. When this bishop is gone, we have a very bad discover attack, and also knight to e4 threatening to grab this f6 pawn is very unpleasant, so this is very bad for black. But in the game, white had another plan and played king to h1, clearing this g1 square for his bishop. And now black finally plays f6, supporting this pawn on e5. White responds with bishop goes to g1, preparing to deploy it here on h2. Well, black has to be careful. Black now cannot simply release the tension in the center with e pawn captures on d4, because after c pawn recapture, now this pawn structure here is very strong, and all white needs to do is to play e5, targeting this h7 square. This could be very, very unpleasant for black. So in the game, black plays rook to f7, preparing to neutralize the pressure here along the e file, and white plays bishop to e2, preparing to strike on h5, trying to skewer this rook on f7. So black plays rook goes immediately to e7, and now queen to d1, again threatening to jump with bishop on h5, putting a lot of pressure here on queen on e8. Well, let's see. Again, if black makes, I don't know, a random move, we have bishop to h5, attacking queen on e8. Here black would be forced to play g6, further weakening his pawn structure around the king, because if queen goes, for example, to f8, then white simply captures with f pawn on e5, and after when this f pawn is gone, we have here attack with the rook on the queen on f8. So in the game, black plays king to h1, creating a square for his queen, and now white immediately reacts with bishop to d3, because after queen to g8, we have a triple attack on this pawn on c4, so white could defend with the queen to e2. And now black comes with another plan with the 6-6 and a later g5, trying action here on the queen side. So first black plays knight goes to f8, targeting this b5 square with the queen. And now white finally plays f5, partially blocking the position. Black plays c6, bishop goes to h2, and now of course b5. Black follows his original plan, but white has other things in mind. Now this pawn chain here on the king side looks really intimidating, but believe it or not, white tries to undermine it with pieces. Knight to f3 was played. Now this pawn is twice attacked, so black immediately grabs it. Knight captures on c4, gaining a pawn, but white doesn't care. This knight on c4 is protecting this pawn on e5, so white immediately grabs this knight on c4. B pawn recaptures, and now white plays queen to c2, clearing this d1 square, preparing a rook to d1 to take over this d file. Of course, on the other hand, black intends to take over the b file with rooks on the 7th and the 8th rank, but maybe because once these pawns are gone, then bishop can attack this square on b8. Maybe the best option for black would be rook to b7 and later with rook to b8, but in the game black plays rook to b8 immediately, and white responds with rook to d1. Of course, when this pawn is gone, we have attack on this d6 pawn, later trying to grab also the 6-6 pawn, so black tries to get rid of the double pawns anyway. So c5 was played, and now d pawn captures on c5, d pawn recaptures, and now rook to d5, targeting this defenseless pawn on c5. Now one of the options would definitely be bishop to b7, attacking the rook and also putting a lot of pressure here on e4 pawn. Let's say if rook captures on c5, then black plays knight to d7, attacking the rook, so knight enters the game with tempo, and after maybe rook to a5, after queen to d8, again attacking rook on a5, or it only takes one wrong move, let's say rook to a3, but then after knight to c5, this pawn is double attacked, and also black threatens with jumping on d3 square, very unpleasant position. Knight to e2 simply doesn't have. We have rook to d7, double attack, we're on a knight on d2. But in the game, black saw things a little differently. Rook from e file goes to b7. Now black has doubled the rook along the b file, threatening to invade on the second rank. But here comes a very stunning, almost clairvoyant response from white. Knight captures pawn on e5. Well, one of the options, of course, is simply to recapture or maybe to invade on the second rank. Let's see, if rook goes to b2, yeah, white has a couple of options, either to go on c1 or capture the rook. Let's see, if queen captures rook, after rook captures, then white has a very strong move, rook goes to d8, the queen. Of course, queen can capture, but let's see, if first queen goes, let's say, to a4, then we have knight to a6 check. If king goes to, let's say, immediately to g8, rook goes to f8, after king to h7, rook to h8 checkmate. If, however, king goes to h7, then we have knight to f8 check, after king to g8, knight to g6 is going to be made very soon. Let's say king to f7 and rook to f8, again checkmate. If, however, queen goes to h5, then we have again knight to g6 check. If black doesn't want to get mated immediately, then queen has to capture knight. After pawn captures, again white threatens with a checkmate of f8. After king goes to g8, we have bishop to e6, and now we have double attack on this knight on f8. Black king is going to be checkmated. There's nothing white can do about it. So in this position, black would have to capture this rook on d8, but then we have knight to f7, forking both king and the queen. After, let's say, king to g8, knight captures queen, material is equal. Yeah, black would probably then capture pawn on a2, so black has a passed a pawn. Yeah, that's true, but white would definitely try with rook to b1, then later to b8, creating a lot of problem here for black on the last rank. So this is very hard to actually analyze this kind of position. But let's go back to our game. In the game, black has decided to capture this knight on e5. So f pawn captures on e5, bishop recaptures, targeting this rook on b8. So black plays rook to d8, offering the trade of rooks. Of course, white is attacking, so black wants to trade as much as pieces as he can, and black plays f6, targeting this pawn on g7. Of course, the worst option is if g pawn captures on f6, we have a bishop to f6 check, and or I can attack on the rook on d8. If, however, black captures rook on d5, we have f pawn captures on g7, forking both king and the knight, and after, let's say, well, black has no other option but to capture with rook, and after bishop captures check, after king recaptures, we have e pawn captures on d5. Yeah, for rook, black has two pieces, but this is lost for black with king in the open. White simply threatens with queen to a5 and later harassing black king. Queen to e5 doesn't help, then we have queen to f2, and after defending the knight, queen to e7, all white needs to do is to deflect the queen. After e6, let's say queen captures on d6, then we have queen to f7 checking to h8, the only option, and here white gains another piece and is in winning position. Okay, let's go back to our game. So black plays king to g1, and now white here in this position, white had a winning move, but it's not so easy to see, and the winning move is f pawn captures on g7, targeting this knight on f8. After knight escape to d6, we have queen goes to d2, doubling the forces along the d file, and also targeting this pawn on h6. Let's say if black doubles the rook along the d file, it doesn't have. After queen captures, threatens with a checkmate here on h8. After knight, let's say, captures on g7, we have a bishop captures, again threatening with a checkmate, and after rook captures on g7, rook goes to h5, again threatening with checkmate. So here black would only sacrifice his queen for a rook. If, however, black would first grab this rook on d5, then simply queen captures, again threatening with rook to a8. You have to keep in mind that this knight on d6 is pinned, so cannot help. So after black defends this rook to f8 with rook to f7, we simply have rook to b1, threatening to invade on b8. b8 square is protected. Of course, black can defend, but black here is totally in defensive position. There are so many tactics involved, and white would definitely find the correct path to the victory. In the game, however, white first grabs rook on d8, and after queen recaptures, only now white plays f pawn captures on g7. Maybe it would be best if knight would go to e6, still protecting this f8 square, also targeting this pawn on g7, but black plays knight goes to g6, attacking bishop on e5. And now white responds with bishop to f6, attacking queen on d8. Now it's not easy to advise black what to play, because this is definitely a difficult position. Maybe black could have tried with queen to e8, protecting this knight on g6, because white would definitely try to play e5, protecting this bishop on f6, threatening with rook to d1 with invasion here on the last rank. So after bishop to b5, trying to play rook to d7, preventing this invasion on the last rank, white would probably play queen to c1, targeting this pawn on h6. After king defends, then we would probably have rook to f5, threatening with rook to h5, again attacking pawn on h6. So it's definitely a very, very difficult position for black in all cases. In the game, however, black has decided to play queen to d3. Of course, attacking queen on c2, and also rook on f1. Of course, queen cannot capture, because after that c-pawn recaptures, later summons his passed pawn on d5. Black is already a piece up, so this would be winning. So white has to keep on fighting, and in this position white had a winning move, and the winning move was rook to d1, attacking queen on d3. Of course, if queen captures on c2, then rook goes to d8 check. If, for example, king would go to h7, then white simply promotes g-pawn to queen, and it's checkmate. If, however, king would go to f7, then again white would promote g-pawn to queen, and after that black can only play king captures on f6. Then white would play rook to d6 check. King can go to e7 or e5. If king goes to e7, it's rook to e6 check. After king to d7, queen to e8, king to c7, and rook to c6 checkmate. If, however, king would go to e5, then we would have queen to e6 check. After king to f4, queen to g4, the only option. Again, if king goes to e5, rook to e6 checkmate. If, however, king would go to e3, queen to f3 checkmate. So actually in this position, black shouldn't capture here queen on c2. If that would happen, rook to g7 would have to be played. After rook captures queen, after c-pawn recaptures, we have a queen to b3 check. Also threatening with queen to b8, black would have to defend with rook to f7, and then simply e5, protecting this bishop on f6. Rook and a piece is sometimes enough for a queen, but not in this position. This is totally one for white. In the game, however, white doesn't play rook to d1. Instead, white played queen to c1, targeting this pawn on h6, threatening with checkmate here. So first black plays rook to f7, targeting this bishop on f6. Well, white cannot immediately play queen to h6, because rook on f1 is not protected. White should have tried to protect it with king to g8. Now rook is protected. Let's see, king to h7 doesn't help. Then white would still play queen to h6 check. King can only capture on h6, and now again g-pawn promotes to queen. Rook is under attack. Again, this bishop is protected. Maybe black would have tried with queen to f1 check. After king recaptures, we have rook to f6 is check. King has to go, let's say, back to g1. Have rook and two pieces versus queen should be a nut, but this black pieces are totally coordinated. White has three passed pawn. White is definitely better here, so the computer says, but of course one thing is what the computer says and what it actually happens in the game. It was a rapid game. Player didn't have a lot of time to calculate, so it would be interesting to see what would happen here in this position. Okay, let's go back to our game. So yeah, white definitely takes care of this rook on f1 safety, but white played rook to f3, and that was a fatal blunder. Now black responded with queen to e4, queen to h6, grabbing this pawn doesn't work anymore, because after queen to h6, black simply grabs bishop on f6, and after rook recaptures, we have queen to e1 check, after king to h2, queen to e5, attacking both king and rook. So this is again winning for black. So in the game, white plays rook to d3, attacking the queen. Queen goes back to c6. Now this e8 square is protected, so rook cannot give check here on e8. And this bishop on f6 is still under attack. There are many good squares for his bishop. Actually, there's only one. So bishop goes to d8, and now bishop to b7, threatening with checkmate here on g2. Well, black is definitely better, and white might have very well resigned. In the game, rook to g3 was played, and now we have knight to f4 three times. Pawn on g2 is 3 times attacked. Of course, maybe white could try with queen to f2 after knight, let's say, captures. We have a queen to f7 check. After king captures, white promotes to queen and it's checkmate. Yeah, that's true, but black would probably found this continuation. And if maybe white tries with queen to c2, protecting this pawn on g2, well, black simply captures. If, for example, queen captures, we have rook to f1 check. Queen cannot capture because of the pin. After king to h2, it's rook to f2, skewering this queen on g2, and after queen captures, it's queen to h1 checkmate. If, however, rook captures on g2, we have again rook to f1 check. After king to h2, we have queen to d6 check, and after white defends with the only move, rook to g3, it's rook to h1 checkmate. In the game, white played king to h2, and after knight to e2, both queen and rook are forked. And white realized there's no point in playing on, and therefore in this position Rameshbabu, Pragg and Duda resigned the game. So I hope you like this game. I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.